was Anthony Saturno, our local PRS Pulse artist, on the extremely exciting new Paul Reed Smith SE Silver Sky. I didn't really know if I'd ever say SE before the word Silver Sky, so this is really cool. I'm actually very excited this is happening. Three main things are going to happen in this video. Number one, we're going to take both of these guitars completely apart. We're even going to try and see if we can swap some of the parts and see if they interchange. Very fun. Two, we're going to do a bunch of playing. Anthony here is going to shred this thing. If you want to see that stuff, feel free to skip ahead if you don't want to get all nerdy with me on specs. The timestamps are in the description below. And then third and finally, we're going to give this guitar away. That's going to be at the end. Also, it's in the timestamps if you want to skip ahead and just get yourself a free guitar. But for now, what we're going to get into is the differences between these two guitars. That's the question everyone's been asking online so far is, you know, what's the dealio? What's the real differences? So put on your nerd hats because we went deep on this one. We took both of these guitars completely apart and checked every last bit of the differences. And the reason why I wanted to do that is because after spending some time with this Silver Sky, the SE, it's apparent that the quality of this guitar was so high that I said, guys, we need to take this thing apart and see how they're doing this. I have to say, first impressions, I am astounded at how good this guitar is.
Yeah, seriously.
It really is. I'm blown away. So, let's get into it. The body of this guitar. It's identical. The measurements we used with the caliper, we checked the thicknesses, the widths, all the different things. And it's identical except for one little tiny part, which is just a little bit of more of a flat spot up here in this cutaway. I don't know if that was really on purpose or what, but it's the same body. It really is. The main difference to me actually is in the routes for the pickups. The pickups have a more traditional style kind of triangular bobbin, and it sits in that matching route. Now this is a huge deal because the original Silver Sky, the USA guitar, has these sort of rounded straight routes that you can't put any other pickups in. So if you want to put, let's say, Lambertones, who we're a dealer for, into the USA guitar, you can't swap any other pickups into it. Right. So they are amazing pickups in that guitar, so you don't really want to swap them most of the time, but that's the fun part about Strats, is you can
do whatever you want.
As parts galore, you know, you can do anything. So I think it's really cool that PRS, it seems like intentionally opened this guitar up for some modding and for some variety. Really, really cool. Other than that, there is shielding paint inside the SE, which there actually isn't any shielding inside the US guitar, which I thought was kind of interesting. SE also, the back plate is different. Well, I should say it exists. On the USA guitar, there's no back plate. It's John Mayer's vibe. He just doesn't want a back plate. I don't know why it is that they added a back plate for this one. Seems like it would make it more expensive to make. I don't know. Yeah. But there's a back plate on this guitar. Again, maybe a little bit more traditional is the goal here.
Sure.
That's pretty much it. The body is pretty straightforward. Now, the elephant in the room here that people have been discussing on the internet is that it's made of poplar, which for some reason people are freaking out about. You know, alder never was a expensive wood or a tone wood in specific. You know, alder was used on Fenders because it was, to be honest, inexpensive and easy to get, and it sounded pretty decent too. Basswood is another great sounding tone wood that Ernie Ball uses a lot, that a lot of people think is like a cheapo cop-out wood or something, but it's actually a very good tone wood. I've built a bass out of it personally, specifically because it sounded so good. Poplar's used in a lot of things. I have no problems with the poplar body, and I think it sounds fantastic. So weight, big discussion in guitars. We can barely even sell guitars if they're too heavy. The USA guitar, 7.5 pounds. The SE, 7.3. Nearly the same thing. Obviously, they're all going to be different. Every piece of wood is different. Every guitar is different. But right out the gate here, this is the only SE that we have access to. But we do know that the USA guitars are in that weight range and average. So really good news. A nice lightweight guitar. This guitar, the SE, interestingly, has a truly satin neck. The US guitar's got a little bit of pushback because it's like a semi-satin neck. it can get a little sticky. It can kind of gloss up a little bit. So I think it's really cool that they went to a full satin feel on these. Do you like that better, Anthony?
I do, personally, yeah. I'm a satin neck.
I talked to John Dretto, a good friend of ours and a PRS artist and creator the other day, and he got to demo one of these guitars also. He's releasing a video that's coming out on release day on January 11th also, and his biggest compliment was to the neck finish. He's like, finally, they do a proper satin neck.
Yeah,
and
man.
he told me that he personally prefers that. Which I do as well. I think
you just glide right across them.
I think most players do. So that's a really great. I think that's almost an upgrade. There's minor carve differences in, let's say, the headstock and things like that. Nothing really to note different than the USA guitar. Most interestingly, I would say is the nut area is completely different between the two guitars. So great talking point, because SEs. People tend to, on forums, say that they don't have good nuts or you need to replace the nut. Now we sell and play, I mean, well over 1,000 Paul Reed Smith guitars a year. We're one of the top 10 dealers. We sell tons of them, including SEs. We haven't really experienced a ton of issues with nuts, to be honest. Could they be better? I guess so, but for the price point, I think that they're pretty darn great. There's always an upgrade to be done somewhere, even on a $5,000 guitar. There's gonna be something that could be better, right? But in our playing around with this guitar, in the day that we've had it now, we haven't had any major issues using the trem. We haven't had any major binding issues. The nut's been very, very good as is. So, I can only comment on what we've experienced so far, and I've got no problems with it at all. It seems great. Now, on the USA guitar, the nut area is completely different. It's more vintage Fender style, so the fretboard actually continues through the nut, and it has a much smaller nut on it. Also, you'll notice that the truss rod area is much different, although actually the route underneath the truss rod cover is about the same. Of course, the truss rods themselves are a little bit different. One is Indonesian, so it's 7mm versus some sort of English standard size, because I don't know fractions on the USA guitar. Does anybody know how English standard even works?
It doesn't make sense.
Okay. So the other part I thought was extremely interesting about this guitar is on the neck, the 8.5-inch fretboard radius. Original USA Silver Sky was 7.25, which is the vintage spec for a Strat, which was the goal of that guitar, is a vintage guitar. And it's really interesting to me that on this lower price point, they actually went for a quote-unquote more modern profile of the fretboard and the radius. It's still a slab board style construction like an old Fender. It's going to look like the fretboard is thicker if you look down the side of the guitar, but our guitar tech Amar smartly pointed out to me that that's because the radius is flatter, so you see more of the fretboard on the end. We actually measured the thickness of the fretboard on both guitars with the caliper. They're exactly the same thickness from the top to bottom in the center. So it's literally the same as the USA, just with a different radius. So if you're one of those guys that hated 7.25, which, look, I get it, there you go. Now you can buy a Silver Sky with a different radius. Both necks use a scarf joint. They are a little bit different scarf joint. That's in the neck between the main piece of wood and the headstock, if you're not familiar with them. I don't think there's anything super significant to talk about there. The headstock itself, we measured with a caliper. It's the same thickness. It's the same width. I thought it looked a little bit different, and I think that the reason why is because of the tuners, actually. These tuners have a smaller collar on them on the SE. And when you see the headstock, it makes it almost look a little bit, I thought it looked a little bit meatier or like a little fatter. Yeah. And I think it's actually just because you're seeing the tuners be smaller, so it's kind of appearing fatter. We measured it all with a caliper, and besides, again, those minor current differences, that's about it. The inlay is identical. Literally, it's identical. There's no difference. And the last really interesting thing about this neck is we measure with a caliper front to back at the 12th fret and at the nut, and all of these measurements all over the place on the neck. And the official statement from PRS, actually, I have right here. We sent an email. Are the neck profiles different? And they said it features the 635 JM neck shape. It sure does feel like that. When we measured, we got the exact same measurements, literally like within a fraction of a millimeter, on every spec except for the thickness at the 12th fret, the front to back thickness. Now, it was only off by 1 millimeter, which is very, very, very small. So when you make a neck, you have to sand it. And these necks are both sanded by hand. So, if you sand a couple extra strokes on that neck, you're going to take off a little more. 1 millimeter is a decent amount, but as far as I have learned working with PRS for these many years, that's well within spec of tolerance, as you'd call it, right? Also, hey, maybe that's 0.5 millimeter on one and 0.5 millimeter on the other adds up to 1 millimeter. I don't really think it's too big of a deal, especially considering that every other spec of this neck is literally dead on to its USA counterpart. I think this neck profile is truly the exact same neck profile you get on that guitar, besides the fretboard radius change, obviously. Really interesting, and I think that's amazing for a company like this to offer for a $100 guitar to $850, the exact same neck, actually with a satin, same inlay, just the nut area is the only thing that's really different. Oh, last bit on the nut. Official statement from PRS is the SE features a synthetic bone material shaped similar to the rest of the SE line. The USA version utilizes a slimmer profile bone nut. There you have it. Oh, lastly on the neck is the frets. So the original USA Silver Sky used a slightly different fret than they actually do now for if you were to buy a 2022 Silver Sky. They changed the shape a tiny bit. We confirmed this in July that they made that change, but we don't know exactly when they made that change. So this guitar, we're comparing it to the Horizon Silver Sky, is a original first run guitar. We did that intentionally to compare, OG USA Silver Sky to the latest off the block here. But the fret size is a tiny bit different on these two, but the official statement from PRS is if you were to have a current 2022 now Silver Sky, the frets are, quote, not the same fret material, but is similar in shape and size. I think they're basically the same fret shape. They didn't say what the material was, and I didn't inquire further, but I'm assuming it's simply just a varying form of nickel alloy in the frets. Alloys, if you're familiar, are percentage mixes of metals. So, you might mix another 10 or 20% this way or that way.
Right.
I haven't noticed any major differences in the frets. So, there you go. Now to some very interesting things. Electronics. The wiring and the soldering on the SE, absolutely excellent. Our tech was really impressed, and I was really impressed. The wire appears to be the exact same wire that's used in the USA guitar. The pots in the SE are high quality Korean part. They're called Alpha pots, and they look pretty nice. They kind of look like a CTS pot, sort of. There's a different capacitor, of course, than the USA guitar. Still seems like a pretty high quality cap, but it's not the fancy US version. And the jack is different. Once again, it's a Korean part, but it's a nice part. All in all, the electronics are very nice. Now, when we get into the pickups, this is where things change a little bit, believe it or not. So these are called the John Mayer pickups, the S version. So PRS, if they have a US pickup, let's say it's called the 8515, their Indonesian counterpart will be called an 8515S. So this is the John Mayer S pickup. Interestingly though, besides the bobbin being different, we also noticed that when we measured the output of the USA and the SE Indonesian built guitar, the USA pickups were 6.29 k ohm, 6.32 k ohm, and 6.3 k ohm. Again, that's a tolerance thing. They're all basically the same. But when we measured the SE, they were 7.36 in the bridge, 7.35 in the middle, and 7.16 on the neck. So consistently, they're all about one full K-ohm. I don't want to say hotter because that's a whole conversation we can get into. It's a lot more things that make a pickup hotter, but they are making a slightly larger amount of output, essentially. There's a lot of other factors there, so don't just take that straight away that they're hotter pickups. But it's a very interesting difference. That's really probably one of the bigger differences we've even been able to find with the guitar because they're so similar.
Yes.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing. Okay, moving on to hardware. And then we have something really fun to talk about. Hardware, again, was pretty similar. We saw some differences. The finish overall in the guitar is very high quality. A lot of Indonesian or Korean guitars, you can tell when you touch them, their finishes feel kind of sticky. I didn't really notice that so much with this. Very good paintwork, very good everything about it. Similar also when you got to the knobs and the tuner buttons and all that. The knobs feel maybe a tiny bit cheaper. I hate to even say that. They're really similar. If you didn't have them side by side, you probably couldn't even tell, but otherwise the knobs are the same design. The switch feels very good on the SE. Again, the US guitar, the switch feels a little bit better. The SE does not have the same strap buttons. It has just more basic strap buttons, not that big of a deal. Nickel hardware on both. The SE does not have locking tuners, but let's get a little deeper on the tuners for a second. The buttons on the tuners are literally identical. I can't feel a difference. I can't really see a difference, nothing. Now, we also took a tuner off of both guitars. They're actually stamped with the exact same maker's mark of whoever it is that machines them. They just have the different shaft on them for the locking bit. And a locking tuner doesn't mean that it's going to lock it in tune. It just means you can change your strings faster and theoretically have less coils around the peg, so hopefully it stays in tune a little better. There's a bunch of various benefits. But I don't see a major loss with the tuners as we've been playing and using this guitar. Has it gone out of tune much for you, Anthony?
No, I mean, we've been shredding on it for a while and it's stayed pretty much
very,
in tune.
very stable. As far as I can tell, these are literally like the exact same tuners. I don't know who it is that makes them. I can't tell what that tooling mark is, but they seem identical besides the actual locking portion. I'll get to that in a second. Those are identical. The neck plates on both of these guitars are made out of aluminum that are black anodized. They have a different anodization feel, but they're both an anodized aluminum part, which I think is a really cool feature on the SE to have an actual aluminum neck plate. The bridge also is interesting on the SE. So the traditional PRS bridge design that they're very famous for has 6 independent screws, one kind of in front of each saddle that hold it up, and the whole bridge rocks on a knife edge that is attached to those screws. In the SE, they changed that, and it's only a 2-point bridge, which is more like a Fender. I believe this originally came out on the deluxe Fenders, I think in the late 90s or something. Don't quote me on that, Fender people. But it's a more Fender-like 2-point system. I don't know why it is that they made that change. You think, okay, hey, there's less screws, so that's cost cutting. But I don't know, it's also more Fender-like, so I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. The saddles, as far as we can tell, look identical from a visual inspection. I don't know if they're made in the same place or not. The collar for the trem arm is also nearly identical. It's the PRS push-in type that has a set screw you can change, which is the best thing ever. When we do our video talking about the Player Series Fender with the stupid freaking screw-in arm, God, it's the worst. It's so annoying. On the bridge block, if we flip the guitar around, both of them are steel, as far as we can tell. The US guitar has a machined steel trem block. Machining is generally a higher end process that theoretically is stronger and better in every way. And as far as we can tell on the SE, it is a cast steel bridge block. Not a huge difference, but they're both steel, which is really cool because a lot of times you'll get a zinc block in a cheaper guitar, which is fine, but it doesn't sound as good, to be honest with you. So high points again for the SE. The jack plate, the output jack area there, that whole plate is near identical. The bodies, the routes are basically identical. As far as I can tell, they're interchangeable, although we didn't try personally. Really high quality hardware on the whole thing. Okay, so this is where it gets fun. And no, we're not giving it away yet. We will do that in just a second. We actually noticed that the parts on this guitar were so similar and so high quality on the SE that we thought, could we swap a neck from an American guitar or a pickguard to this SE? We like to mod guitars just like you do, so we gave it a try. And you know what? Turns out, we actually tried several things. The neck actually swaps perfectly from a US to an SE and vice versa. They go both ways, and the neck pockets fit fantastically. There's really no gaps, and the same screws work for each other. They're the same thread pitch and stuff for the screws. It's the same neck plate actually works for both guitars also. They're literally identical, giving it, to me, again, this is amazing, like how high of quality that is. Now, the pickguards as well. You can take the whole pickguard assembly from the USA and stick it right onto the SE. It just goes right on, put the screws in, you're good to go. Now, the SE pickguard can't go into the USA because the USA, as I was talking about earlier, has a different type of route for those pickups, not the more traditional triangular style, so it doesn't really work, but not the biggest deal. But it all drops right in. Like I said, the output jack plate also fits, as well as the tuners. They swap identically. They're the same shaft size, the same screw holes. So really good, interesting upgrade path there. Now, here's the only problem with everything I just said. None of those parts are available to purchase. Please don't ask me. We can't get them. PRS won't sell them to us. But I'm wondering if PRS is looking at building a guitar platform that really truly takes Fender head on in the way that it's very high quality, it's standardized, and people will be able to produce aftermarket parts for these guitars. And you'll have an upgrade path on these guitars probably at some point when we come out with them. PRS did come out with SE locking tuner sets that you could buy that were really reasonably priced. We install a lot of them here. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a proper locking tuner upgrade for these come available at some point. I think it'd be smart, PRS, if you guys are watching. It'd be really cool. I mean, I personally love to mod, and I would love to see some people come out with loaded pickguards for these guitars for, you know, I mean, I'm sure, John Mayer, you're probably rolling over your grave right now, but what if Warmouth made a neck for this? I think it'd be really cool. I think it'd be really cool if you could start using those parts and swapping them just like you get to do with a Fender. PRS has never been able to do that before because their necks are set necks. So without further ado, I'm going to drink this delicious beer that we just put in the kegerator today, and Anthony's going to play some schmutz on the SE.
All right.
That was fantastic. Now, what was the song you were playing?
That was called Dirty Doves by my band Atkins Riot. Look us up on Spotify, iTunes,
There
anything.
it is. All the streaming channels, right?
Yep, all of them.
Exactly. Okay, so Anthony, now that you've actually gotten to spend some good time with these guitars, how do you feel? What's the difference?
I mean, personally, the first thing that I'm going to notice is, the satin neck.
Okay.
It's just so much easier to glide across, going from a lower register to a higher register, that's what I want to feel is,
On the SC, so you're saying it has
on the SC,
a better low to high register transition type of feel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, the neck radius has a lot to do with that too, because you're not,
Absolutely.
baseball batting, the whole thing.
Absolutely. Coming back to our radius discussion earlier, that 7.25 inch radius is going to feel great in those lower registers. Mm-hmm. But as you come up the fretboard, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to do bends and things like that, as Anthony is clearly a very big fan of. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. That's really cool. How about tonally?
Tonally, I thought the American had a little bit more full body sound, a little bit more clarity to it, just a little bit, more of a.
I would say it has a little more pizzazz. It has a little more, although it's interesting, even though the SE has more technical K ohms worth of output, the USA's pickups sounded a little more lively. They just sounded a little more gooder.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There you go.
But here's what I do have to say, at least from my perspective. I don't know if you heard this while you were playing, but the sound of the pickups when you had gain on them on the SE almost felt a little bit more rolled off in a good way. It was like a very meaty, thick type of sound that I liked quite a bit.
Yeah. Sometimes I like to achieve that kind of like by like rolling off the tone on a gain pedal.
But you
or
didn't
something,
do that here, right?
Which we didn't do that here, no.
Right.
Because we kept it the same through both. And like having the glassy tone with these pickups,
it almost gives me the vibe of, especially on the gain sections, more different and less better or worse. You know what I'm saying? I would use the pickups in the USA guitar in a different situation than the pickups in the SE if I had no other tone knobs or tone controls available to me. That's me personally at least. But clean, I think that the USA, hey, look, it's a more expensive guitar.
Right.
They definitely sound better per se. But is it a difference? I don't really think so.
So on the USA model, I think the lower register is a little bit easier to play and it sounds better to me tonally, just because of the thicker, or I guess the smaller neck radius.
Yes, the curvier.
The curvier neck radius.
Exactly.
Yeah. Getting up higher, obviously, it's a little bit harder to bend, just because. It's just got
because of the curvier radius.
Because of the curvier radius.
The SE Silver Sky is going to be available, according to PRS, in January. Let's just say February to be safe, due to COVID here. They're going to be on our website very soon. You can click the link in the description below and sign up for notifications on the product page, and you'll know the moment that we list these guitars. We're not doing pre-orders. We're not going through any of that mess. Sign up for that list so you'll be the first to know, first come, first serve, and grab one of these suckers. They're going to end up selling out. We all know that. John Mayer wouldn't let that happen otherwise. This one in specific, we're going to give away for free. So to do that, you need to like this video. You need to subscribe to our channel. How did you guess that was going to happen? Also, comment below your favorite John Mayer song, or if you hate John Mayer. And then please click the link in the description below. You'll sign up for email list, and you'll get randomly selected to get this guitar. It's $850, so I mean, hey, that's a good free deal for 5 seconds worth of work and helping promote your favorite storage guitars. That's basically it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for getting nerdy. Thanks for going down the rabbit hole. And listen to Anthony's music because it's really great. And buy one of these guitars from Paul Reed Smith and John Mayer because it's the best collaboration I genuinely think has happened in the guitar world in decades.
Yeah.
See you guys.